Good evening, everyone. Let's start with our motivation. So at this moment in this room, there's 10 human beings, there's 4 cats, and there may be 15 or 20 people online with us viewing this live streaming. And so many other people around the planet are engaged in different activities. Some are caring for aging parents. Many are headed off to work or getting off work. Some are visiting loved ones who are in the hospital. Many are outside supporting their children in some kind of sport. Some people are putting in the 3rd or 4th hour practicing an instrument. Many are studying for exams and writing papers. People are having conversations. For sure, most are encountering difficulties, large, small, experiencing some kind of temporary happiness. In every moment, countless numbers of sentient beings are being born and dying. In Kunamoto, Japan, in the last few hours, a 2nd earthquake struck. This is the 2nd one in 24 hours, leaving at least 9 people dead and more than 450 injured. So one can imagine that people are texting each other, calling each other to find out if they're okay. Emergency service people are combing through the wreckage of buildings. People are grieving. People are celebrating. Some are engaged in spiritual activities. Some are planning to harm. Many are engaged in programs to assist refugees. And you can just continue the list of what people are doing in this very moment. And we can just wonder how many people on the planet right now have an interest in a spiritual life, in learning how to work with their mind, how to engage in virtue and avoid non-virtue. How many people are even slightly suspicious about how things really exist? How many are aware of the fleeting nature of this life? So think for a moment about when this fleeting nature of this life became important for you. And what is it that you want to do with the time remaining in this life, given that we don't know how much time we have left? So let's make a strong determination to cultivate our wisdom and compassion and keep the long-term goal of full awakening in our mind and heart for the benefit of all. So Venerable Children is in Hamburg tonight. She's probably sleeping right now, maybe. And this weekend she's going to be giving some talks. Oh no, she's in Frankfurt. Yeah, she's in Frankfurt for the weekend, and then on Tuesday she's in Hamburg. So we're continuing with the reviews of the Gomchen Lamrim. And tonight this topic that we're reviewing is precious human life. So many of you may think, oh good, I know this one. I can just park my mind and sleep, and when she rings the gong in about an hour, I can do the prayers. And it's actually a great opportunity for us to review this material. And as Venerable Chodron points out, when His Holiness the Dalai Lama teaches, he will, if this is a topic he's teaching on, at the beginning of our part of his teaching, he's teaching to all these geshes and senior monastics on the stage who have heard this topic since they were kids. And I'm sure that all of them are getting it at different levels than I would ever get it in this lifetime, but they're getting it on different levels. And so here's an opportunity for us to continue to deepen our understanding of this topic. And it's a very beautiful meditation to do. It's so encouraging. And it gives us such confidence if we really put our mind to it. And it's a great meditation to do if you're feeling discouraged or depressed about what's going on in the world, like the list of things I just read out, or if you're just feeling complacent about your own practice or frustrated. This is the meditation, one of them that is really recommended to do, to get our mind, rejuvenated and just to really see how precious this opportunity is. So the last time that Venerable taught this was in September of 2015. So this is maybe the last time you heard the material in some depth. You might be doing a glance meditation every day. Maybe you've done this throughout the winter retreat. I don't know, but we have another chance in the next hour and a bit to go over the material again. So I'd like to start with something that Geshe Sopa says about this topic. And when I was reading this, I thought, wow, I wish I would have heard this somewhere in between the range of 10 and 14. So you might think about yourself and when earlier in your life would you have been receptive? Let's say a bodhisattva, let's say a Buddha disguised as someone you know, or someone you get to know when you're younger, sits you down one day and tells you these things. So that when, we're having our first crisis and our first boyfriend or girlfriend ditches us, and we think the world is over, or we're wondering, I'm not attractive enough, I'm not cool enough, everyone is smarter than me, what do I do with my life, my family's a mess. Then we can bring to mind these words. Oh, there's something else I could be doing. I don't have to be following the pack and trying to be cool. I could actually do something with this life. So this is what he says. And so if you want to just get into meditation posture and listen to this, and just imagine yourself as a 10-year-old or a 17-year-old, see if this does something for you, because it really had an impact on me. So bring to mind somebody that could talk to you, that you would have listened to, and you didn't know they were a Buddha. So you must make something out of your life, because once you lose this rare opportunity, it will not easily come again. Therefore, you must take the essence of the opportunity. The heart of this life is not to be found in any temporary achievements. It is found in attainment of the highest good, the final goal. There are so many things you can achieve in your life, but so many of them are not essential. What are the critical goals of a human life? All sentient beings want happiness and don't want suffering. Everyone's primary goal is to be free from every kind of trouble, misery, or suffering. Striving for the goal of true happiness is the essence of a human life. The best situation you can attain is Buddhahood. However, on the way to Buddhahood, there are various levels of religious goals. Using the right methods to reach those goals is the true meaning of extracting the essence from this life. So the first step is to think about why this life is so fortunate and wonderful. Your life is extraordinary in terms of what you can achieve with it. However, if you don't recognize the precious opportunity that you have, you may waste it. To give you an idea of how precious a human life is, imagine the following. A poor person happens upon a precious jewel. he or she has to recognize what he or she has found for it to be of any use. If she thinks, it's just a hunk of stone, she'll throw it away and miss a precious opportunity. However, if she realizes the value of what she has in her hands, then she can sell the jewel and be freed from hunger, thirst, and poverty. The basis of taking the essence of life is to recognize three things. Number one, how special it is. Number two, how useful it is. And number three, finally, how suddenly you can lose your life and how difficult it is to obtain such a life again. So the first thing we have to do is become aware of what you've already achieved, the freedom and good qualities of a human life. Second, we must contemplate its great value. Third, the point is to contemplate how difficult it is to obtain such a precious opportunity. Like most valuable things, this type of life is very difficult to obtain again. Realizing these facts will result in a strong inclination to practice. The urge to use your life properly will naturally arise. So when you're ready, you can come out of your meditation. So maybe we can make an aspiration tonight that in our next life, someone sits us down when we're most open as a kid and plants those seeds, and then we can, learn what to look for as we continue to mature. But we still have this life, and we're alive, and so we're going to look at these 18 factors. And then, as Venerable Children recommended, she gave the instruction before she left that we'll meditate on this topic. So the last 30 minutes of this review will be meditating on the topic, and I'll give you her exact words on how to approach this. So the other thing that Geshe Sopa says at this point in his commentary on the Lamrim Chemno is that the entire Lamrim text is really about taking the essence of this life. So here at the beginning, he's talking about precious human rebirth. We're urged to make use of this precious opportunity. The main purpose of this advice is to urge you to do something meaningful. After you've studied the teachings, the important thing is that you do something meaningful with your life for others. So now I'll switch to Venerable Children. And she says this, and when I first read this, I think it was, probably open heart, clear mind, maybe somewhere like that. Anyway, this shocked me out of my head when I read that all human life is not necessarily a precious human life, because you have to have the 8 freedoms and 10 fortunes. Otherwise, you can be born as a human being and have no interest in spiritual matters, in Dharma practice, and just having a human body doesn't give you a precious human life. You have to have these 18. So then, of course, I thought, well, maybe I can bargain and, have 3 of the 18, 9 of the 18. What's the answer to that? No, it's all or none. So as we go through these, you might think about, when in your life did you have them, or when did you really know you had them? And what ones maybe are on the weak side? Maybe you have them, but they're not as strong. Okay, so we're going to start off in this text in the Gomchen Lamrim. The author actually starts with the 4 human non-free states. So the first one is living in a distant land. And this is being born in an uncivilized place where any kind of spiritual practice is either outlawed or ignored. A very barbaric type of society. Now, most of us in the room weren't born in a Buddhist country, and so we may have thoughts that where we were born and raised was somewhat barbaric, but it doesn't compare at all to what I'm going to share with you. So I've been very concerned about North Korea for a number of years now. And I'm going to share this first piece of information with you that comes from the United States Commission on Religious Freedom. And this was from 2003. Then the next thing I'll share is from this year, 2016. So this is the state of North Korea 13 years ago and longer. The people of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea are arguably the least free on earth, barely surviving under a totalitarian regime that denies basic human dignity and lets them starve while pursuing military might and weapons of mass destruction. By all accounts, there are no personal freedoms of any kind in North Korea and no protection for human rights. Religious freedom does not exist. And what little religious activity that is permitted by the government is apparently staged for foreign visitors. That was 13 years ago. This is from the Human Rights Watch about 3 months ago this year. Under the rule of Kim Jong-un, North Korea remains among the world's most repressive countries. All basic freedoms have been severely restricted under the Kim's family's political dynasty. The UN Commission of Inquiry found that abuses in North Korea were without parallel in the contemporary world. They include extermination, murder, enslavement, torture, imprisonment, rape, forced abortions, and other sexual violence. North Korea operates secretive prison camps where perceived opponents of the government are sent to face torture and abuse, starvation rations, and forced labor. Fear of collective punishment is used to silence dissent. There is no independent media functioning or any religious freedom. That's pretty extreme. North Korea. So, the next one is being born with incomplete senses. So this is usually explained as being mentally incapacitated. So this includes being deaf, dumb, or blind. And that was really a problem in ancient times. Obviously, if you were blind, I mean, you know, in India or any other poor country, or any country really, you had to live with your family, and I'm not sure what kinds of skills you would have gotten, but you know, there was no Braille at that time. There was just no resources for a person with that kind of disability. So now it's very different. You know, blind people, you know, there's Braille, they can hear the teachings. Same with being deaf, you know, people can sign. So there's, when you go to His Holiness' teachings, there are people signing. It's just amazing. So that's not so much of a problem now, but there's more problems included in this, and this includes having an intellectual disability, which is profoundly difficult, regardless of when you're born. It makes it hard to understand the teachings, if you can understand them at all. There's more and more categories, it seems, for people who come into the world with some kind of compromised mental state. There's, you know, different levels of autism. If your mother was drinking alcohol during pregnancy, then there's a high chance of, you know, the little baby having fetal alcohol syndrome. And someone with that kind of diagnosis just basically cannot learn. They can't control their impulses. The brain is profoundly affected. So there's so many situations where people, you know, come out and the mental faculties are already compromised in a very big way. And then the other thing to be very clear about is that, you know, if we have the luxury of living long enough, now we're at the other end where we could also lose our cognitive ability. And the latest information, I hope this isn't right, but anyway. So they're saying that nearly 1 in 2 people over 85 will have some level of dementia. And this is because now we're entering the wave of the silver tsunami, which is the baby boomers who are aging. So there's all kinds of reasons why people get dementia and Alzheimer's. But as we've all seen, more and more people are developing this. And so this is what we can also anticipate if we live long enough. And then for some people who are, you know, professional athlete and they're in a kind of sport where there's body contact. There's early onset dementia for these poor guys who are smashing their helmets into other helmets. And NFL is trying their best to deny this, that there's any kind of sort of relationship to this, but it's being proven over and over again. So, something to keep in mind as we age. The third one is holding wrong views, and as Venerable taught, she said that this is the worst of them. This is absolutely the worst. And the review last week for the Precious Garland, both Venerable Semke and Venerable Jigme made that very apparent. If we have wrong views, it cuts us off from any interest in the Dharma. So we don't go to teachings, we don't explore things, and even if someone tells us something that is valuable, we don't bother with it, we forget it. We don't take the teachings seriously. And if we have a mind that disparages the teachings, especially the teachings on emptiness, then we create a lot of negative karma. We'll probably fall prey or fall into the nihilistic position. We don't want to think about cause and effect, and we just give ourselves permission to do whatever we want to do and create a lot of negative karma. And then Venerable Children went on to say, when we're thinking about this and we hear about wrong views and we think about other people that we know have wrong views, it's important that we don't think of this as people being punished. It's not being punished. It's just if we're in that situation or we know people in that situation, then it puts limits on someone's spiritual practice and what they can accomplish. The fourth one is living where the conqueror's teachings don't exist. So this is the place where a wheel-turning Buddha has not descended, like Shakyamuni Buddha. And so if you were born before the Buddha appeared, you might have a lot of spiritual interest, but there is no teachings available. So now we're going to shift gears and do the 4 non-human states. And the first one is the hell beings. So Venerable Children says, imagine that you're born in that kind of realm where physical pain and suffering is just beyond what we can possibly imagine. And then she says, if the whole thing of thinking of a hell realm really is a trigger for you because maybe you've been raised in a Christian situation where you thought by gravitating to Buddhism you'd be free of the hell realms and all that, and it just freaks you out. She says, if that's the case, think of being in a hell realm that's on the planet. So we know lots of them. There's so many examples of being in the hell realm here on the planet. My other topic of concern these days is Syria. And so I found a recent update on what it's like to live in Syria. I don't know that I'll go through all of it, but this is the latest from again, from the UN. So it starts off by saying this. The war in Syria has raged for 5 years and has claimed the lives of more than 250,000 people. Millions have fled, as we know. But nearly 18 million people still live in this country. So what's it like for them? The United Nations says that more than 6 million people have fled and they're looking for somewhere else to live. What is it like, though, for the people who can't flee? And there's so many people who can't. Either they're caring for children and they're not, or they don't have the money to buy the boat, which is going to sink, or they're too afraid. And so here's what's going on if you're in Syria. 5 years of war has all but destroyed the Syrian economy, with unemployment estimated to be running at over 50%. Syrian families face a daily struggle to make ends meet. Nearly 70% of the people there are living in extreme poverty. They're unable to secure basic food and non-food items. They just don't get it. Now, food is being used as a weapon of war. So, with aid often diverted onto black markets or into government-approved areas, reports of people starving to death have emerged from besieged areas like eastern Ghouta, a rebel stronghold on the outskirts of Damascus. With so many people in Syria at risk of injury and illness, access to healthcare has become hugely important, yet as the war has gone on, many of the country's medical facilities have been repeatedly attacked. Between the start of the war in March 2011 and November 2015, Physicians for Human Rights documented 336 attacks on at least 240 medical facilities across the country. The number of available healthcare professionals has dwindled to approximately 55% of the pre-war period. Access to healthcare is basically not happening. Just finding a medical facility that hasn't been bombed is a problem. And then educating the next generation, this is the biggest concern. Thousands of children since 2011 have been killed. But for those that have survived, the outlook looks really bleak. So the education system has been shattered by war, with 1 in 4 schools having been damaged or destroyed. And the schools are usually used as a shelter or a military building. Even if the schools were intact, many would be unable to open, with almost 1/4 of the teaching personnel no longer in their posts. So, when we think about the Hell Realm, the realms of Syria, the world of Syria and the world of North Korea is really not much different than a Hell Realm. The primary thing about being born in a Hell Realm, wherever it is that the mind is so preoccupied with physical pain, there's no mental space to think about the Dharma. I would say none. Then the second realm is the Preta realm, and this is characterized by a being having a mind preoccupied with hunger and craving. So again, there's no space for Dharma. And according to what Venerable Chödrön was talking about, the Pretas run all over looking for food, and when they finally find some food, the food vanishes, or they get it in their mouth and it turns to pus and blood. Or it becomes, if they do get the food in, then it becomes like hot burning metal in their stomach. So imagine having some kind of body like that, where you're constantly craving, but what you crave causes you so much pain. And then there's the animal realm. And so we can think of the grasshoppers and the stink bugs and the chipmunks around here and the deer. And the main problem with this realm is that the animals just can't use their mind properly. And then some people, I've even heard people here at the Abbey, some guests usually, who say, they look at the cats here and they look at how the cats are adored. They say, you know, the animal realm's not so bad. You know, if I could end up here, that'd be great. If that's where I have to go in my next rebirth. And we say, no, don't go there. Don't go there. So a few years ago, my cousins took me to the aquarium at, it's close to San Jose. SeaWorld, I guess it was. Yeah, we traveled somewhere. Monterey, is it?
Yeah,
Monterey. Anyway, it was pretty impressive, and I was absolutely horrified. There were so many things floating in the water there I'd never seen before in my life. It was shocking. So I found this very quick description of the different layers of the ocean, not to turn this into a science class, but this is going to be fruitful for your meditations, because, you know, we think of cats and dogs. They're at the top of the heap of the animal world, you know, especially now, because people adore their animals more than they adore some of their relatives and friends. But just think about this and then use this in your meditation in the future. This is tough. If you're going to don't end up here. So the first 200 feet, I'm not going to tell you the names of the zones, you don't need to know that, but the first 200 feet is where most of the sunlight penetrates. So in that 600 feet, there's a lot of life that we're familiar with. And then from there, you know, the ocean gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So then between 656 feet and 3,000 feet, the light now is getting very faint, but this is where there's apparently a huge amount of sea life. So between 600 and 3,000 feet deep. There's things that glow in the dark, and again, we don't know the names of everything there. There's very strange fish they're finding still. Then the next layer down from that is about 3,200 feet to 13,000 feet down. There's no light at this point. It's called the dark zone. So the only thing that is creating light are these creatures that emit small little bits of light. And the water pressure at this point is about 50 to 100 pounds per square inch, pressing on these living beings that I guess can adapt to this. And then the last zone is from 19,000 feet to the very bottom, wherever that is. The pressure is 8 tons per square inch. And invertebrates like starfish and tube worms thrive at those depths. So imagine a rebirth there. How would you ever hear the Dharma? I mean, the cats can... you know, it's not going to happen. Venerable Trini's going like this. Yeah, well, how would you create virtue if you're in that bottom zone and you're a starfish? So when I saw this, I thought, oh, this is really bad. But then we still get sucked into thinking about the cozy animals that we know. We forget that. We forget the insect world. And so then we want to gravitate to this very beautiful story I'm going to share with you that maybe you've read. It came out. I saw it at the end of retreat. And then we'll think, oh, I could be born in that animal body. It'd be okay. So ever since a 71-year-old Brazilian man rescued a struggling penguin, he's been receiving regular visits from the penguin ever since. So this fellow by the name of, I can't really pronounce it, it's Spanish name, Waho or something, a retired bricklayer, lives in Proveta, a fishing village just off the coast of Rio de Janeiro. In 2011, he spotted a starving Magellanic penguin drenched in oil on the beach near his house. He named the penguin Dindim, and he fed him every day until this little penguin was strong enough to leave. But the penguin refused to go. So then this fellow decided to take the penguin out in a rowboat. And so he took him out and dropped him off in the ocean and said, see ya. But when he got back to the shore, guess who's there waiting for him? So he says, this penguin stayed with me for 11 months. And then just after he's changed his coat with new feathers, he disappeared. So this fellow's neighbors, oh, so here's something about these Magellanic penguins. They regularly swim thousands of kilometers a year to breeding spots on the coast of Argentina and Chile. And from time to time, these penguins show up in the warmer waters in Brazil. So many of this guy's friends thought that when Dindim had finally left, that was it. This little friendship was over. But a few months later, Dindim returned and found this guy. And now, every year since 2011, he spends 4 months with this fellow. He arrives in June and leaves to go home in February. And every year becomes more affectionate with this fellow. But if others try to go near this penguin, he tries to bite them and walks away. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll skip this other part. Anyway, the fellow says, I love this penguin. He's like my own child. And I believe the penguin loves me. So, you know, then my mind goes, okay, a penguin for a life. No, let's not do it. Let's not do it. There's too many layers in the ocean. Way too many. So Geshe Sopa says about these first 3 realms, why they're so difficult, the hell, preta, and animal realms, is that it's almost impossible to produce virtuous karma there, much less pursue any kind of higher goal. The beings in those realms don't have the leisure to do even one single practice leading toward full awakening, because they're constantly enmeshed in misery and ignorance. So if you're born into a hell realm, there's no opportunity to practice meditation, because of course your mind's completely overwhelmed by suffering. And then the 4th realm is the long-lived God realm, and this includes all the gods, but especially the 4th material God realm. They only recognize when they're born and when they die. Otherwise, they're spaced out in some kind of meditative state, almost like being drugged. Even though this is considered an upper rebirth, the mind's not really able to do anything useful at all. So at this point, it's good to know that, there's layers of human lives too, as we know. There's people who have tremendous suffering in life, and then there's some people who seem to do, whatever they want, and they just sort of breeze through until a certain point. And Venerable Chodron says that, human lives also contain misery and pain, but humans can use suffering as an object of meditation and a basis for realization. So we can benefit from understanding the suffering. Hell beings, hungry ghosts, and animals experience great suffering, but since they have little or no ability to understand their suffering, their experience will not be of any use to them. Okay, so now we're going to go to the 10 fortunes. And these are divided into 5 personal good fortunes and 5 general good fortunes that have to do with society. So the first one is being born as a human being. And after hearing this, we should really appreciate this after all of that other contemplation of the other realms. We have a human intelligence, and as we've heard His Holiness the Dalai Lama say many times, we have to realize that this is a very precious thing that we have, this human intelligence, because if we use it wisely, we can do so many amazing things, and if we use it unwisely, we can do so many awful things. But having this human intelligence, which is based on having a human body, is very precious. You can see that having human intelligence, you can be here and listen to the teachings. And by comparison, if there's any animals outside, they're going to hear the Dharma just by happenstance, if we're outside chanting mantra out loud. The next one is being born in a central land, and there's different ways of defining this. So the first one is geographic, and the center is Bodh Gaya. And it can also be defined religiously. So according to the Vinaya, it would be where you have the fourfold Sangha, which is fully ordained nuns and monks, female and male lay followers. And at this point in Venerable Chodron's teaching, she really made a point of going into this, which I will repeat, because I think it's just so important for people to realize how precious it is to have fully ordained monastics. And so she went on to talk about the development of the Abbey, and that for many, many years there weren't 4 bhikshunis. There were just, well, first of all, it was Venerable Chodron and 2 cats, and then some lay people came along and ordained, and then I guess it was December of 2011, Venerable Chuni and Venerable Jigme. Was that when you came back?
Yeah, the first.
Pardon?
The first Pasada was December.
Okay, so the first Pasada here was in December of 2011, and then since then we've had it happening here. So by having 4 or more fully ordained bhikshunis, it allows us to do the Pasada, the Varsa, the Pravarana, the Rains Retreat. And Venerable says that it's very important to have a place where the Dharma is visible in the world, because when you have a monastic community that does these rites, then people can say, oh, yes, there is a group that's really practicing. They're keeping pure ethical conduct, or they're working at keeping pure ethical conduct. They're doing these Vinaya rites. They're meditating on love and compassion. They're training together. So we can think of them, and when we're troubled, we can think of a place where they are, and we can go there and we can practice with them. And for sure, when I was up in Canada, when my parents were very ill, I was very comforted by the fact that there was a community here practicing. It was very comforting. And people come here and tell us that. People write in all the time and say, it's so comforting to know that you're there practicing. So she says, a community of monastics lets people know this is a space where something very different is happening. So that's why it's important to have the Sangha, to make sure that the community does at least those 3 rites: the twice monthly confession, the Rains Retreat, or we call it the Winter Retreat, and the invitation at the end of the Rains Winter Retreat. We need the Bhikshuni and the Bhikshu Sangha. We need male and female lay followers, especially lay followers who've taken refuge in the Buddha, and optimally people who have taken all 5 precepts and keep good ethical conduct, and people who want to practice well and want to support the Sangha. Because when we have those kinds of people coming to the Abbey and practicing, or anywhere where there's a gathering, then they're the kind of people who will attract new lay followers, and some of them will later ordain. So we need all four groups for there to be a central land. Another way to discern a central land is where you have Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and where the perfection of wisdom sutras are taught. So then the next one is having complete senses, especially a sound mind, not being intellectually handicapped, not completely insane, were Venerable's words. So I guess partially insane is okay. But
As long as your mind can change.
yes, as long as your mind can change. She also said it's important to have complete organs and also sexual organs that are complete. And the reason for this is that if someone has unusual sexual organs or both sexual organs, then it's difficult for them to ordain if they want to. And the problem with that is you have to ordain either as a bhikshu or a bhikshuni. And there's no other category. So that's the problem with that. The next one is a person hasn't committed the 5 heinous actions. So this is very heavy karma. And according to the fundamental vehicle, if we've done these things, killing our parents, killing an arhat, causing a schism in the Sangha, drawing blood from the Buddha, it's said that these are so negative, and according to the fundamental vehicle teachings, you can't purify them in this life. And at the time of death, you go automatically to the lower realm. So we have the fortune of not having done that. And then the good news is in the Mahayana, especially in the Vajrayana, they say it can be purified in that very lifetime. Then the 5th one is having faith in the 3 baskets of teachings. So this is the Vinaya basket, the Sutra basket, and the Abhidharma basket. So these are 3 ways of categorizing the topics. The Vinaya is about the monastic code, and this corresponds with the higher training of ethical conduct. The Sutra basket corresponds to the higher training in concentration. Not just sutras that teach concentration, it is sutras with the Bodhisattva practice. And the Abhidharma, which corresponds to the higher training of wisdom. So being someone who has faith in the Buddha's teachings, has respect for holy beings, you're drawn to the Dharma in some way. Some faith, some aspiration, some attraction has taken place. So when you think about that for yourself, have we always had that? And then Venerable goes on, and this again is just so encouraging to hear. And it's something that we need to tell ourselves a lot. And she says, look at that part of ourselves that has respect for the teachings and the teacher. The part of ourselves that's interested in the Dharma. And to see that's not a quality that everyone in the world has. We're fortunate here living in a community to meet people that understand that part of us. To respect that part of ourselves that is sincerely interested in the Dharma and wants to learn and to practice and has faith, and to respect our Dharma friends. And this is the part we really need to put as a sign on the wall. We really need to cherish and respect each other and respect ourselves because we have this interest. This is so important. We have to really respect our interest in the Dharma. She says it's a very precious part of us. Respect it, nurture it, treasure it, live with that in your heart. And then of course, we'll go somewhere, or maybe go and visit our family, and they'll say, oh, forget it, come back, come be normal with us. And she says, respect yourself and your Dharma friends. It's hard to have this kind of interest. And when you look at all of the backgrounds that we've come from, most of us weren't born in a Buddhist society. We didn't learn the Dharma when we were little. We weren't taught things about the Dharma. And somehow, at some point, this interest arose in our mind and heart. And somehow we found the Dharma in this life. And so she says, consider how miraculous this is. So when I was thinking about this, I remember, I grew up in central Alberta. How many Buddhists do you think there was? What do you think? Other than the Chinese restaurant in town, well, there was nothing else that was Asian. Not nothing. And so it wasn't until, I think it was the year I was, I think I was 24, and this particular Christmas, our family went to Banff for Christmas, and we met it with our cousins there. And we stayed at this place, and my grandparents used to live there. So it was like, I think it was 5 years after my grandmother had died, and my grandfather had died 9 years earlier. So it was our first Christmas in Banff since the passing of my grandparents. So in this particular hotel, there was, in the drawer in the room, there was the Bible, but then there was this other red book. I had no clue what this red book was. And so, one day I was bored. It was very cold when we were there. It was about -40 Fahrenheit, so we weren't going out for walks. So I cracked open this book. I think it was Boxing Day. And I don't remember the exact title of the book, but it was, Buddhist sutras and things like this. And I thought, And the thing that I cracked the book open to was that passage about, even if you carried your parents for 100 years or 100 lives or something, you could never repay their kindness. And it went on and on about how you could never, ever possibly repay their kindness. Look at what all they've done for you. They've raised you in, affection. And it just wasn't like anything I'd encountered before. And I guess I was open to that. So I stole the book. I took it home with me. I had that book for a long time, I'm telling you. I still had the book when I took refuge. I stole it. So I don't know, something happened there. And then, of course, the story about me seeing venerable children. I'm not going to do that story again. But, something happened there where, again, I was receptive, and then I stole. But I did mail the book back to that hotel. I didn't put a note in or anything. It was a long time. So anyway, when we do the meditation in a few minutes, you might think about, what was your first moment of encountering the Dharma? What state were you in? Maybe it was a conversation with somebody. So just think about that and then just rejoice. The Venerable says it right here, cherish this, nurture it. Okay. Then there's 5 factors from society. So the first one is where the Buddha has appeared, a wheel-turning Buddha has appeared. The second one is where the Buddha has taught the Dharma. And the third one is where the teachings have been maintained. And this is really, they're all important, but, so then we think about, well, what would it be like to be born before there was a wheel-turning Buddha and there's no teachings? Or maybe you were born at the time of the Buddha, but he hadn't taught yet. And then just to think about all the difficulties and what people have gone through to, sustain the teachings for 2,600 years or more, and how many times the Dharma has been endangered by war, by famine. It's very difficult to be in a place where the teachings still exist, where they're stable, where we have both the scriptural or the transmitted Dharma. And then Venerable really says, you have the teachings right now, the Tripitaka, the canon, where you have realizational Dharma practitioners, realizations that come from practice, and this doesn't mean we personally have all the transmitted Dharma and the realizations, but there are people who exist in society who do. So at this point, we're in a situation where if we want teachings, we can go out there and there are people, we can learn how to find who is an authentic spiritual teacher. And there are people who, have the lineage of teachings, who can teach us about how to, about the true paths and true cessations and how to meditate. And there's a tradition of alive, living masters who can impart the teachings to us by their oral teachings and just by being a living example. Let's see. And then she goes on to say, again, think of how many places there are in the world where this is simply not possible. We could be born in those places where the teachings, maybe they did exist at one point, but then something happened. And if you've done any study in history, then, you can refresh your history of what you've read about Tibet or China in the Cultural Revolution. And just to remind you about China, here's something for your meditation. The Chinese Communist Party was the only regime to extinguish 3 religions simultaneously. Soon after the CCP established a government, it began to destroy temples, burn scriptures, and forced Buddhist monks and nuns to return to secular life. That actually is an understatement. It was much worse than that. And it wasn't softer on any other religious institutions. By the 1960s in China, there were hardly any religious places left in China. The Great Cultural Revolution brought even greater religious catastrophe in this campaign called Casting Away the Four Olds. Do you remember reading about that? It's really... So, cast away old ideas, old culture, old customs, old habits. And with that as their mantra, Mao and his supporters mobilized these young radical people called the Red Guards, and they were ordered to destroy the four olds: old customs, habits, culture. So colleges were shut down so that students could engage in this, and they began to attack almost anything and anybody that stood for authority and met the criteria of the four olds. Schools and temples were destroyed, their teachers and parents were vilified, and in thousands of cases, people were beaten to death or driven to suicide. So, when we think of what people have endured in the past, and that isn't our situation now, this can really inform our meditation. The fourth one is to be in the presence of Buddhist followers. So we have a Sangha community following the Buddhist teachings. We're living in a place where there's like-minded people who give us moral support and inspire us in our practice. And we're living in a place where there is followers of the Buddha. And again, we can ask ourselves, do I have that condition? Well, the people in the room do right now. But many people actually on the planet, they may be interested in the Dharma or they are interested in the Dharma, but they choose to live in a place where there is no Dharma support. And sometimes people are just stuck because they can't move financially or emotionally, or they're taking care of family members. Something's going on where they just can't, change the situation. And so we all know how difficult it is to practice alone and how much easier it is to practice with people. The fifth one is a place where there are people with loving compassion and concern. So this refers to people who are benefactors, who will support us materially in our practice, where there are Dharma teachers who, if you're ordained, the person makes sure you have the four requisites, in which those are food, clothing, shelter, and medicine. And to live in a place where there's benefactors and patrons who believe in what we're doing and who will support us. And as Venerable Children encourages us and anyone in this similar situation to really, think about the fact that if we did not have these people supporting us, we'd all be heading into Newport every day, getting a job and working and taking off our robes to work. And that is not our situation here. But there's many monastics on the planet who do have to work, who do have to, they're not comfortable wearing their robes. They go in for the day, and then at night, I guess they put their robes back on, and how difficult that is. And then, of course, when we keep that in mind, then just to have this, just really cultivate daily this gratitude for this support that we receive, and this gratitude will inspire us to practice well. So it's very compelling. So those are the 18 factors. And we're going to do some meditation now. We're not going to meditate on all 18, but we'll see how far we get. And then I will ring the bell, and I have something from His Holiness the Dalai Lama that I'll read as a closing to this review. So do what you need to do to get comfortable. going to begin by giving you Venerable Children's advice on how to meditate on this topic. So she says, for each of these 18, imagine what it would be like to be in that situation. And ask yourself, how can I practice the Dharma if I live in a very barbaric country, for example, where religion is shorn, and how to practice if I'm mentally incapacitated. So for each of these states, you imagine being born in that situation and bring all of your imagination to the fore in creating that situation, and then come back to yourself and see the incredible freedom and ability we have in this life, in this time that we're living right now. And to remember that we've been born like this in the past, in these situations, and there's a very good chance that we could have this situation again in the future. So really make it a personal exploration, make it real. So the first one, let's contemplate being born in a distant land, in an uncivilized place, where any kind of spiritual practice is either outlawed or ignored. And now imagine being born with incomplete senses. Maybe you want to focus on having an intellectual disability. You simply can't understand the teachings because you can't learn. And because you can't learn, you have a low-level job. You work many hours a day for very little. It's just sleep, eat, work. Now imagine being a person who holds wrong views. So you don't believe in karma, you could do what you want. And maybe you become rich for a while. But imagine the state of mind where you're totally closed. You have no clue about how to create virtue. Ethical conduct is a joke. And then you come back to yourself and you see that you are free of that. And the fourth non-freedom is living where the conqueror's teachings don't exist. So imagine living in a place there's absolutely no Dharma. And then think I'm free of that situation. So now we'll meditate on the four non-human states, beginning with the hell beings. And when we meditate on the hell beings, see that the hell realm corresponds with the results of anger. And think about how a certain mental state creates your body in a certain environment. Imagine if you're seething with anger all the time. This puts so much anger and suspicion and distrust and vengeance in the mind. You were born in an environment with all those qualities. And then think, I'm free of that state. Now imagine being a preta or a hungry ghost. All you do non-stop is look for food. You find it, it vanishes. Or if you get it in your mouth, it's like hot burning metal in your stomach. And just see how the preta realm corresponds with results of attachment and craving. The greed, the wanting of more and better, never satisfied. You never get what you want in the preta realm. And then think to yourself, I'm free of that situation. And then bring to mind being in the animal realm. And reflect that the animal realm corresponds with results of ignorance. It comes from making ourselves really stupid, spacing out, sleeping too much, doing stupid things with our mind, thinking about stupid things, and then as a result, being born as an animal, we just can't use our intelligence. And then think, I'm free of that situation. And think of being a long-lived God. In particular, a fourth material God. Or just zoned out for eons. The mind isn't really able to do anything useful at all. And then think, I'm free of that situation. So now let's turn our attention to we'll just do one of the 10 fortunes tonight. And really take some time right now to look at the part of yourself that has respect for the teachings and the teacher. That we're sincerely interested in the Dharma. We want to learn and practice. And to really cherish this very precious part of ourselves. And how can we respect that part of ourselves and continue to nurture and treasure it and keep that alive in our heart? And also to have this idea of respecting others and cherishing others who have this kind of aspiration to study and learn the Dharma, to transform our hearts, and to keep it all within this aspiration of bodhicitta. And then it's very important for us to continue to make dedication prayers to steer the ripening of our good karma so that it ripens in this kind of situation in every lifetime in the future. And how fortunate that we've made dedications and aspirations in the past to meet the Dharma. So we need to continue to do that in this life and not take the opportunity for granted. So I'd like to end with something from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Becoming Enlightened. It's very inspiring. No, Sultram, can I ask you to turn on that light? I don't think I can see it. So this is the section on precious human life. And this section starts off with the need to practice now. Since this body of complete leisure and opportunity was very difficult to get, and once obtained will be very difficult to have again, make it meaningful by striving at practice. And that's from Atisha. Now it's His Holiness. Appreciate how rare and full of potential your situation is in this world. Take joy in it and use it to your best advantage. In this context, you can put your analytical intelligence to work, diminishing the causes of suffering, the three poisons of lust, hatred, and ignorance. Gradually, over time, you can get rid of destructive emotions altogether and can train in altruistic attitudes and deeds. As the Indian scholar Yogi Shura said, human life is a stream of good qualities, better than a wish-granting jewel. Having attained it, who would waste it? Everyone wants happiness and does not want suffering, and happiness and suffering depend on virtue and non-virtue, respectively. Destructive emotions make the mind untamed and unhappy. To the degree that these counterproductive emotions diminish, the mind is happier, more at ease. Hence, the key to happiness is whether the mind is tamed. This means that taming the mind is a transformative practice. I look at it this way. In this world, there are more than 7 billion humans, each of whom wants happiness, not suffering. Among them, there are 3 groups: those who accept transformative practice, those who deny its value and avoid it, and those who neither accept nor reject it. Which people are happier, those who accept it or those who reject it? It seems to me that those who reject transformative practice generally do not see destructive emotions as problematic. Rather than viewing lust and hatred as toxic, they allow themselves to get roiled by these attitudes. Those who accept transformative practice, and Buddhism in particular, view lust and hatred as emotions to be avoided. So for the most part, they are more peaceful. This is why it's necessary to practice. Given that we are currently endowed with the extraordinary qualities that enable us to practice, we must do so right now, for there's no guarantee that we will have such a situation in a future life. As Tsongkhapa says, you should think day and night, I will make good use of this body of mine, which is a home of illness, a basis for the suffering of old age, and lacks a core like a bubble. So hopefully we can bring this to mind when we start feeling discouraged or depressed about the world, about our place in it, what do I do with my life? You know, that whole story. We know it so well. And to really spend time with this meditation and, you know, kick into gear, really. That's all I have. Thank you. There's no time for questions. But if you have insights that you'd like to share, we've got some time for that. I know it's hard to talk after meditating, so.
I really appreciate the different way that you led the meditation. It made me realize that the worst of all these situations would be the wrong views. It came up quite strongly in my mind. I imagined myself in these different situations that you led us through. And just like, wow, all the other ones, there was some like glimmer of hope. You know, but that one, it was just like, it was just kind of a shut door.
Okay, shall we dedicate?